Lovely to see everybody. Nice big crowd. That's great because there's going to be a few questions tonight, a few challenging issues and possibly a prediction. I don't know. All right. So let's start firstly, guys, with a word of prayer, and then we'll do a little reading. All righty. Can everybody see the young prophets? Yep. Okay, you'll notice that it says Russia, Lebanon, and Christ. Now, you don't often hear much about Lebanon, but I thought, well, because Joshy and Tilly and Eli and Benji are Lebanese, we'd have a night on Lebanon. Yeah. Okay. And we'll see Lebanon in Bible prophecy, which we don't often hear about, we don't often talk about, but we're going to tonight. So to introduce Russia, Lebanon, and Christ, we're going to ask Levi, if he would, to read Daniel chapter 11, verse 36 to the end, and thank you, Levi.
Too easy.
Okay, now, before we start, we've got to do what we always do, and that is we put up a picture and a quote. Who can unmute themselves and tell me what's the picture, what's happening, and what's the relevance to us?
It's a person blowing the shofar, and they are like warning people that are coming to like towards the city for attack or whatever. And the relevance to us is that we need to warn people about the kingdom before it's too late.
Thank you very much, Rosie. You've obviously listened in one or two Young Prophets classes. Well done. Okay, so that's what we're going to do tonight, because if we don't tell people what we know and they die, their blood is on our head. So we have to know, and we have to tell them, and we have to tell them what we know. So let's start to do that tonight. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about this little country here. Does anybody know the name of this country here?
Lebanon.
It's Lebanon. That's right. That's the colours of Lebanon. That's the cedar tree of Lebanon. And I'd like to introduce you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and young people, to two esteemed gentlemen. The first esteemed gentleman, well, that's him there, and his name is Saad Harry. Actually, that's his actual name, Saad Harari. His name is, but we can call him in English Saad Harry. Now, I'm not going to ask you, well, does anybody know who Saad Harry is? Saad Harry used to be the Prime Minister of Lebanon. But something happened, a disaster, and he had to resign. And this guy came along, and his name is Hassan.
Happy Larry.
And does anybody know who Hassan Diab is?
The Prime Minister of Lebanon now?
Yes, he was an ex-Prime Minister of Lebanon, but guess what? He had to resign as well. And so these guys had to resign. And now I'd like to introduce you to a third honourable gentleman, Najib Mikati. Who's Najib Mikati? Question mark. Does anybody know Mr. Najib Mikati?
The Prime Minister now?
Well, no, but very close, very close.
President.
No, he's the guy who they want to make Prime Minister. And there's a lot of people very interested in what's happening. And one of those people is watching them with very closely with their eyes. Whose eyes do they belong to? Does anybody know?
Putin.
Very good, Eli. Very well guessed. Those eyes belong to Mr. Putin. The question is, why is Mr. Putin so interested in the current Prime Minister, the last Prime Minister, the previous Prime Minister? Let's ask the question, why? Why is Putin interested in Lebanon? That's going to be the question that we are going to ask tonight, because so far we've seen Russia all around the world. We've seen Russia in Syria. We've seen Russia in Armenia. We've seen Russia in Egypt. We've seen Russia in Sudan. We've seen Russia all over the place. Iran. We haven't seen much of Russia in Lebanon. But I'm letting you know tonight that Russia is watching what's going on in Lebanon very carefully. And we're going to see why right now, because there's two amazing facts that I want to share with you tonight. Now, fact one. I want to tell you a little story about Lebanon, and I'm going to tell you that story now because this, I don't know if you noticed this, it was in the news. We didn't make much of a fuss about it. The Christadelphian community didn't say much, but it was the start of Bible prophecy unfolding. You may not have heard much about this. Most people mightn't have said much about this, but this was incredible, exactly 1 year to the date of today. This is an article, notice up the top, the Epoch Times. The heading says, Lebanon's economy quickly collapsing amid hyperinflation and power outages. In the big circle there, the economy of Lebanon is seeing a once-in-a-lifetime collapse, according to the World Bank. You might say, well, that's pretty sad. Nobody wants that to happen, you know. But like, so what? I'll tell you so what. The reason this is happening, I'm telling you, it's almost unbelievable. The reason Lebanon is going down the gurgler as a country right now is because of one explosion last year. See the red in the middle of the screen? They're having one of the worst economic depressions since the 1800s, according to the World Bank. GDP, that stands for gross domestic product. That stands for what your country is turning over financially. It's been cut in half almost, 40% fall. It's the sort of thing, notice what I've got there on the screen, the sort of thing that is normally associated with war or conflict. Look at what I've got down the bottom. Can you see that? Most of half the population is likely below the national poverty line. Lebanon is in a major big mess. Why? Because of one explosion. I want to talk about this explosion. This explosion is an explosion that knocked out the whole countryside. Okay, check this explosion out. We're going to tell you now why this explosion knocked out. I can hear it. Can everybody hear it? Loud and clear, Rosie?
Yeah.
Right. Watch this. This is last year, August 4, almost a year ago. Watching. This is Beirut in Lebanon. Just fertilizer. It was just 2,000 tons of fertilizer. Wow. It's the third largest non-nuclear explosion ever. Destroyed most of Beirut. Blew holes through ships and port. Knocked all the grain silos out. Devastation everywhere. Hundreds of people died. Nothing's changed since then. Is a guy going to give us a bit of a guided tour?
I'm wearing a mask even though it's outside because the smell is terrible.
That's all the fertilizer.
What you're seeing here is the grain, basically. It's spewed. Including the massive amounts of grain.
This guy gets a bit difficult to hear it sometimes, but don't worry. Just look at the devastation. Big grain terminal.
At some level, I can almost see the appeal of keeping the place as a monument. There is something peaceful about it, but at the same time, it really does not look stable at all. Smell really is something to behold.
These were concrete grain silos.
Sewage and rotting grain. So as you saw, the back is pristine, relatively speaking, of course. But this part here, this is the side that is moving towards this point, towards where I'm standing, I should say, by about 3 millimeters a day or so, which is a pretty fast rate.
ripped
you see
apart.
here is shear of the silos. It's almost as if someone had a zipper and basically tried to unzip the area. My God. It's crazy. I'm standing here in front of the gesture, a statue that was recently installed and made out of reclaimed steel from the port explosion. And as you can see, it's holding, this giant is holding a bird in his hand that's supposed to represent a phoenix, and the day being that Beirut is going to rise again from the ashes like a phoenix. But for a lot of people, those are just empty words. The fact of the matter is, a lot of people have actually been very angry about the statue. The feeling is that such a monument should come when there has been some kind of justice, when an investigation has led to someone being held accountable, when some responsibility has been taken. None of those things have happened. Instead, the politicians only bicker, and they try to block and obstruct the investigation at every turn. That's why this gesture is considered an empty one by many here.
The Wall Street Journal, famous magazine, looks at all kinds of disasters in the world. It says the reason why Beirut and Lebanon is going down the gurgler is because of this explosion. Restaurants are closed. Portable generators are being used. 200 people killed. 15 billion in damage. See in the middle there? And the government had to resign because the people said we can't put up with such incompetence. That Prime Minister I introduced you to earlier, Sam Diab, he said in the red down the bottom, I set out to combat corruption, but I discovered that corruption is bigger than the state itself. I declare today the resignation of the government. Bless Lebanon. Lebanon's in a mess. Lebanon has just about finished. And in the streets, fighting in the supermarkets, fighting for bread and sugar and oil. Inflation's about 400%. Everything goes up 4 times. Murder and crime's happening. There's an absence of government. There's no government. Who's running the place? Down the bottom, you've got this guy who's a Lebanese American University political scientist, and he says, down the bottom, we're heading toward the unknown. This is Lebanon. It's a country about to collapse. I want to just give you a little bit of background. Once upon a time, there was a ship. And this ship was called the Rossus. That's an interesting ship. Can you see next to Rossus the very faint words glory? It was called the something glory before, but a Russian businessman bought this ship and renamed it the Rossus. Ross is just a name for Russia. It's a Russian ship. He called it, perhaps, I don't know, Little Russia is perhaps what Rossus means, but Ross means Russia. It's a Russian ship. It's a cargo ship abandoned in Lebanon. It was declared unseaworthy. The owners lost interest in the cargo. It had 2,700 tons of fertilizer on board. It was confiscated. All the fertilizer was put into a warehouse in Beirut. And in 2020, it blew the whole city of Beirut almost to smithereens. And the vessel's owner at the time was a Cyprus-based Russian businessman. And when the ship blew up, it sank. Now, I just imagine there's a deal to buy this ship. A Russian businessman buys this ship. It sails into Beirut. I just wonder what part the angels played in this little transaction. I'm not sure, but what we do know is that a Russian ship sailed into Lebanon and blew Lebanon up. An accident? Maybe. Don't know. So, That's an amazing fact. What happened in Lebanon exactly 12 months ago? 12. They're not celebrating. They're protesting the anniversary of that right now. Now, I've told you that information about Lebanon because it's going to lead us right into the second amazing fact. There's only 2 facts tonight. That explosion that's absolutely ruined Lebanon is fact number 1. Here's fact number 2. When Levi did the reading, he read a lot about the king of the north and the king of the south. Now, the king of the north is that territory that you can see there called the Seleucid Empire. Seleucid Nicanor was the general who started the Seleucid Empire. How did the king of the north empire start? Can anybody reach into their memory banks and say, okay, the king of the north, the king of the south, these 4 kings, how did it all start? Can somebody give me a quick summary?
Was it when Alexander the Great died?
Alexander the Great died. Who did he leave behind?
His 4 generals?
4 generals. And the 2 most important generals started which 2 important kingdoms?
King of the North, King of the South.
Russia.
King of the North and King of the South.
Right.
What you're looking at on the screen is the King of the North, right? And the Ptolemaic kingdom down the bottom is the King of the South. And these 2 kingdoms were at war with each other and up and down through the land of Israel. Why was the King of the North called the King of the North?
Because he was above the other one, geologically.
No.
Because it was north of Israel.
Yes, because it was north of Israel. Now come in with this one, Joshy. Why was the King of the South called the King of the South?
Because it was below.
No.
Because it was south of Israel.
Yes, because it was south of Israel. He's not called the King of below or the King of above. We haven't got below and above. We've got north and south. That's at the start. At the end, the King of the North let's just go back for a second. Hold on. Just looking for a slide, sorry. Okay, can you see where the territory of Lebanon is? Right there. See that? That's Lebanon. Now, there's the first king of the north, Seleucus Nicator. And there is who I believe the last king of the north, Vladimir Putin. And we don't know that for sure, but we're going to find out. Does anybody, well, you probably don't know, but Nicator, does anybody maybe know what Nicator means? I'll tell you. Nicator means the victor. He was the first king of the north. Does anyone know what Vladimir means? Anyone want to have a guess?
King of the South.
The conqueror of the world.
Ah.
Seleucus Nicator was the first king of the north, and Vladimir will be the last, I think. I'm not sure, but let's see what happens. Who knows what this little spot is?
Hagia Sophia.
Yes, thank you, Caleb. Well done. It's the Hagia Sophia. And where is that located, Caleb?
Turkey.
It's located in Turkey. And what is it?
Is it a church?
Actually, use the Hagia Sophia.
Is it like a mosque or something?
It is like a mosque. And when the group that went over to Israel last time, we went through this building, but it wasn't a mosque. It was, in fact, a museum, which meant anybody could go through it. And when you go through it, it looks a little bit like this. It's absolutely magnificent. And you can see the Arabic writing on the walls. But if you go around carefully and look at all the other stuff, you can see those Arabic plaques. They've just been put on in the last little while. All the walls are full of Catholic artwork. It used to be a church. And it was a church that was built by the Roman Catholic Church. And when we went through, it was museum status. But now it's been converted back to a mosque. Now, I'll refer to this later, but I just wanted you to have a look. Because what happened is this. In 330 AD, Constantine moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople, and that's where Istanbul is. So Constantinople was the head of the Roman Catholic Empire. Who does this soldier work for? Which army does he belong to?
Romans.
Romans.
A Roman soldier. Now, Rome started out small, but what did they end up doing?
Conquering the whole of the continent.
They did, Caleb. Rome conquered the whole of the world. So what happened was, let's go back to Alexander. Alexander, he died. His 4 generals took over. There's a king of the north and a king of the south. King of the north, king of the south. There's wars between the king of the north, king of the south. While the king of the north and the king of the south are warring each other, war. Over on the side, there's this little kingdom of Rome getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And Rome took over the whole world. So was there any more king of the north and king of the south when Rome took over the whole world? What do you think?
No.
Who said no? Eli.
No.
Why isn't there a king of the north and king of the south when Rome takes over the whole world?
Because they're the only king of the world.
They're the one king. Rome takes over the whole world. Rome is north of Israel. Rome is south of Israel. Rome is east of Israel. Rome is west of Israel. Rome is everywhere. No more king of the north, no more king of the south. And then Rome disappeared. And what was the next big power to occupy the whole world? Does anybody know? What was the next big power to take over the whole world?
Greece.
Maids and Persians.
The Ottomans. After Rome.
The Ottomans came next. And this is, I forget his name, but he is the last. I stole that photo, as you can see from the watermarks. Sorry about that. It's the only one I could get. The Ottoman Turks took over from the Roman Empire. And the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire, filled the world. There's no more king of the north. There's no more king of the south. Just one king. All that area that Rome had, the Ottomans now have. What happened to the Ottoman Empire? Rome took over the world. The Ottomans took over from Rome. What happened to the Ottoman Empire? It shrunk just to that area that you can see. What's that area called today?
Turkey.
It's called Turkey. And that's where the empire that was the king of the north and the king of the south and the king of the east and the king of the west, and owned that whole area. Rome owned it first, Ottomans owned it next, and then the last person to occupy it is still there, and all that's left of that world empire is Turkey. That's all that's left. And that's bringing us to our reading. That's who Daniel is talking about when it talks about him. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at him. Because this is what I'm going to try and prove to you right now. When Russia moves into the King of the North territory, Russia becomes the King of the North. So let's have a look at this. This is part of the area of the King of the North. It includes Lebanon. We don't often hear that, but that is part of the King of the North territory. Let's have a look at Daniel 11 verse 40. Either have a look at it in your Bible or have a look at it on screen. It says, at the time of the end, the King of the South is going to push at someone, him. And the King of the North is going to push at someone, him. Like a whirlwind, with chariots, with horsemen, with many ships, he shall enter into the countries, he shall overflow and pass over. But look at the verses before, people. Can you see what I've highlighted? This is all about the king. This is all about the entity that owned the whole world. This is about Rome and the Ottomans. And then what's left of the Ottomans is Turkey. So verse 36 is talking about whoever owned all that area and whatever's left of it, which is just Turkey. Look at this. Let's just say Turkey. And Turkey shall do according to his will. Now, it's not talking about Turkey, but it's about whoever occupies Turkey. Look at the words. His, he, himself, himself, he, his, he, his, he, his, he. And so when it gets to verse 40, and at the time of the end, the king of the south shall push against him, do you think it's the same him for all the verses before? Would you agree with me on that? So at the time of the end, the king of the south is going to push against whoever's in Turkey, because that's the remnant of the Ottoman Empire. And the king of the north is going to push against Turkey, because that's the remnant of the Ottoman Empire. It's the same him in verse 40 as the him in verse 36, in verse 37, verse 38, verse 39. Those verses in verse 36 to 39 are talking about the combination of the Roman Empire that ruled the world and the Ottoman Empire that ruled the world, because there wasn't a king of the north or a king of the south. There was just the one king. And all that's left of it today is Turkey. So Russia is interested in Lebanon. Here's an article from the Armenian Weekly that says it's fulfilling a dream of Vladimir Putin's to own Lebanon. They want to get into Lebanon. They want to be the protector of Lebanon, just like they are in Syria. That's not my words. That is an article in the newspaper this year. And at the same time, there's a few other things going on. Russia has a lot of tension with Britain, which is spelt wrong because it should have an I after the A. That's what Ezekiel 38 says. There will be tension between Russia and Britain. There's tension in Libya. Russia is moving into Libya. That's what Ezekiel 38 says. Libya will be with Russia, whether Russia does it with a friendly way or with a military power. Russia's going to be in Libya. Russia is in Libya. Some Libyans don't like it. Some Libyans do like it. There's tension with Turkey. Russia and Turkey have always had this love-hate relationship. The Turkey is the him of Daniel 11 verse 40, and Russia is pushing against him. Notice the picture of the Sophia Hagia there. Russia do not want Turkey to run their church as a mosque. Notice the headline in the middle there. Controversy as Erdogan says museum and former cathedral will become a mosque. Russia's in Syria. They've got ports and military equipment and soldiers all over Syria. Russia's in Kush. That's Ethiopia. Ezekiel 38. Russia's in Egypt. Daniel 11 says Egypt will not escape. And Russia and Iran and Turkey are all talking together. Yes, there's tension between Russia and Turkey, but one way or another, Russia will be in Turkey by friendly means or by military means. Russia's in Europe. Notice what the article says here. Russia is now a central player along the length of this volatile frontier European security is increasingly at the mercy of Russia. They rely on Russia. Now, I've got to ask you a question. I've just given you a little bit of an overview of all the things that are happening. The king of the north is Seleucid. Seleucid occupied Lebanon. Seleucid occupied Syria. Russia is in Syria. Russia will soon move into Lebanon. That's my prediction for tonight. The king of the north took over Syria and Lebanon. Russia has already taken over Syria, and you watch when they take over Lebanon. Russia is the king of the north because if in the Bible, if you operate in the territory of somebody else, that's who you are. Russia is in Seleucid's territory. He's in Syria. He'll move into Russia, into Lebanon. And at that point, he will push against him in verse 40 of Daniel 11, which is the remainder of the Ottoman Empire, which took over from the Roman Empire, which was the king that he pushes against. So as soon as Russia qualifies to be the king of the north, they'll be pushing against Turkey. But he already is the king of the north. And the question is, who helped the king of the north? You won't believe it when I tell you. The Right Honourable Donald J. Trump. You wouldn't believe it. Yes, Caleb is cheering. He loves it. Because Trump sat down with Putin and said, listen, fella, I'm sick of paying for our troops to be in Syria. What the heck are we in Syria for? I've got soldiers in there. I've got Navy. I've got Air Force. It's costing me millions and millions of dollars. It's ridiculous. I don't care about Syria. They're nowhere near me. I am pulling out. And the comment is that Trump probably made his most significant decision to date. This is not Bible words, but they are Bible words. To stop aiding the Syrian militias fighting Assad, the Washington Post, just a newspaper in America, said this decision provided Russia with final confirmation that it owns Syria. Are you reading these words, people? Are you reading these words? Russia confirms that it owns Syria. It owns the territory of the king of the north. It is the king of the north. And the only other territory to make up that territory of the king of the north that Seleucid first owned is Lebanon. And Lebanon is in such a mess. And Lebanon is in such financial difficulty. And Lebanon is going down the gurgler at 100 miles an hour so fast that Putin will actually come and save Lebanon and add it to its list of territory along with Syria and be the full-blown king of the north. Seleucid was the first king of the north. He owned Syria. He owned Lebanon. Russia owns Syria, and this article from the Washington Post, not the Bible, says Russia will own Lebanon, will own Syria, and Lebanon will be next. Now, the end of the story, we've got to wrap it up pretty soon, so let's have a look at the end of the story. This is what's so important, people. Let's have a look at, Caleb, can you read 41 to 45, mate, on the screen?
Yeah, sure.
So what Levi did, he read this section from 36 to the end. Now I want to focus on the end couple of verses. So, Caleb, could you just read out what's on the screen?
Yeah, no worries. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. And he shall paint the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and in the glorious mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him.
Now, guys, seriously, this is the most important couple of verses for us, and I'll tell you why. Let's just recap what we've spoken about. Last year, Lebanon got into a lot of serious trouble and nobody really cared. We didn't hear much about it. We didn't know much about it. And it's only because they're having their anniversary that we're realizing what a disaster. Somebody bought a ship. Somebody parked that ship in the port of Beirut. The ship had fertilizer on it. They unloaded the fertilizer into the big shed. Pretty soon, because they were so careless, it blew up half of Beirut. Beirut is the capital. Once Beirut blew up, Lebanon's going down the gurgler. People can't buy food. People can't get essentials. Inflation's going through the roof. Horrible place to live. City destroyed. It can't be saved. Government's resigning. Presidents, prime ministers resigning. Russia's looking carefully. Russia already owns Syria. Russia is already moved into the King of the North territory. Russia's got its eye on Lebanon. Lebanon is part of the King of the North territory. Russia, as soon as it's the King of the North, and you could argue, young people, that Russia is the King of the North right now because it's moved into Seleucid, Alexander's King of the North general. He's moved into his territory now. Lebanon completes the deal. If Putin moves into Lebanon to save Lebanon, Putin will have the territory directly north of Israel, Syria, and Lebanon, and be the full-blown King of the North. And Daniel 40 says, Daniel 11 verse 40 says, when that happens, when he's the King of the North, when he owns Syria, when he owns Lebanon, he will push against what's left of the Ottoman Empire, which took over from the Roman Empire, which is the king of Daniel 11 verse 36 to 40. And when he does, he will come in and destroy and move in and take over Turkey and move down and come, verse 41 on the screen, to the glorious land, and many countries will be overthrown. A couple of people will escape. Egypt won't be one of the countries that escape, verse 42. He'll take all their treasures, all their gold. The Libyans and the Ethiopians will be with them. That's what Ezekiel 38 says. And then Jesus in verse 44, the man who comes in from the east, tidings out of the east and the north where Christ is coming from, will trouble him. And he'll go with great fury to see who this is that's approaching him in Jerusalem. And he's going to set up his own headquarters right in the middle of Jerusalem, verse 45, between the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea. That's where he's going to plant his flag, right on the glorious holy mountain. And what's going to happen? He is going to come to his end and no one will help him. And why is this so important for us right now? Because verse 45 is the return of Jesus and the destruction of the invader of Israel. And the invader of Israel is the King of the North. And the King of the North, young people, is just about a fully blown King of the North. All the King of the North has to do to be the King of the North is to own the territories of the original King of the North. Lebanon must fall to Russia to make it the King of the North. And the second that happens, he'll be invading Israel. Jesus will be here, but we will have already been taken. We will already be either in the kingdom or immortal. And so the relevance of verse 45, you might say, oh yeah, that's when Jesus comes and he destroys the invaders and, fixes everything up. Yeah, that's right. He does. It's as soon as the King of the North's ready to go. And I'm saying the King of the North is ready to go. And whether Lebanon happens in the last second before he invades Israel or not, I don't know. All I'm showing you tonight is that Lebanon is ripe for someone to take it over. It's a mess. It will never, ever recover. Russia's taken hold of Syria. Even if it takes hold of Lebanon in the last second before it invades Israel, it's all over, guys. It's all over. The kingdom's here. So go put oil in your lamps. Keep them burning. Don't say, oh, when's it all going to happen? We are watching the headlines every day. Russia is in the King of the North territory. It is the King of the North. And as soon as it's the King of the North, it invades Israel and Jesus comes back. That's why Daniel 11 is so important for us. From verse 36 to verse 45, it's saying to us, Russia's here, they're in the right spot, they're going to invade Turkey, which is what's left of the Ottoman Empire, which took over from Rome, which was the king of Daniel 11. The second it becomes the full-blown King of the North, which it probably already is, invading Israel, World War III, Armageddon, Jesus returns, kingdom set up. We're literally minutes away from this happening. And it's happening while we watch it. While we watch it on Google News, while we watch it on the newspapers, on the TVs, on Facebook, it's happening now. The King of the North is almost and probably is the full-blown King of the North, and the newspaper headlines are fulfilling prophecy right in front of our eyes.